Okay, so in my last video, I got a brand new laser. It's the XTOOL P2 55-watt CO2 laser, and I actually really like it, and I like having it in the shop. Now, in this video, I want to try using the laser and make a project out of it. So, what I've been thinking is, I don't know if you can see, but behind me, I'm working on one of the biggest projects that I have ever done in my whole life. And so I had to prep about 100 skateboards. And from that, I got 200 pieces of these pieces, which is what I like to call the hardware piece. And I made something before using these, but these are really hard to work with. You don't get that much material out of them. And the grain direction is all wrong, and it's not even straight whatsoever. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all these hardware pieces as well as the scraps that I have left over from that other project, which I actually made things out of these hardware pieces, and try to be as resourceful as possible. So what I have here is all these hardware pieces, which I had to just sand it. Now, instead of using the carving disc, I actually been using the flat disc on my angle grinder, and whenever it gets dull and the sandpaper's not working as fresh as it used to, I just switch them out. And I realized it's less than $1 per disc, and the worst part of recycling skateboard is that part, which is sanding off the graphics, and I thought might as well just pay a little extra so that I suffer a little less. And it's been working really great. And after that, I can laminate these skateboards using 2-to-1 high performance epoxy by TOTALBOAT. And if you want to get a discount, make sure to use the link down in the description below. And then after that, I could use my skateboard press and use the 12-ton bottle jack that I have and try to flatten out all these curves as much as I can. And once the epoxy cured, I could take it over to the bandsaw and resaw them into thin veneers. And then after that, I could use the drum sander to sand it flat and nice and consistent for all these veneers. And that's how I got these veneers. And I have about 15 different variations of 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch by about an 1/8 inch thick veneer. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take you up there where my laser is and show you how I'm going to cut these out. It was a lot of work, but I explained it in 10 seconds, so. Okay, so it's really hot right now, so I'll keep it very short. So I have all these pieces cut using the XTOOL P2 55-watt CO2 laser. And it went pretty great. Now, I need to get some kind of exhaust vent or air purifier because there's a lot of smoke that comes off, even with the hose hooked up to the outside. So I highly recommend getting some kind of fan to exhaust that smoke out quicker than what it is now by itself. Now, I actually couldn't wait, so I tried out a couple different patterns because there's 10 different variations of these veneers and they're all different quantities. So some I have 24 of these pieces in single pattern, and some I have it in like 19 pieces. So I kind of had to mix and match. I think I'm gonna go with a different one than the one I have here. One thing that kind of sucks is that I can't really use this frame. It's a little too big. And the frame that, or the size that I could get out of these, it's a lot smaller. I think I could get about 36 round diameter tabletop or wall art. Another thing, I realized it's wasting a lot of materials just cutting these out using those veneers, so I decided to make something else as well. So these are the off pieces that I decided to use, and I'm getting a pretty cool pattern. I actually like this one a little better than the original that I was going for. I could get a small little wall out of this too. So let's do both of them and glue those up. And that means I need to literally go back and pick it all off. Okay, so I have it nicely aligned and I didn't super glue it. Now, what I'm thinking, there is slight gap in between the pieces, and I think that's completely normal. So what I'm actually thinking is I'm just gonna use super glue, put it in between the gaps. Hopefully it just kind of temporarily sticks to the plywood, because I'm gonna pour epoxy anyway, and all that epoxy is gonna fill it and stick to the plywood, so I don't have to worry about floating up when I'm doing the pour. Let's hope it works. It's gonna be a lot of super glue. Okay, so I just sanded it kind of nice and flat so there's no CA glue marks, and nice and smooth, and it's really hot right now. So I'm gonna go home, but before I leave, I'm actually gonna pour a little bit of epoxy to fill the gaps between the pieces. Same thing for that, and that should kind of help prevent the bubbles when I'm doing the thick pour, as well as allow these pieces to secure nicely onto the plywood. So I'm using TOTALBOAT 2-to-1 high performance epoxy, and if you want to get a discount, make sure to use the link down in the description below. Okay? Epoxy has cured, and there's still some gaps here and there, but we'll figure that out. So today, what we're going to do, I'm going to make a round wooden frame out of this walnut and cut these two plywoods into a circle. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm not going to be talking that much. It's just so hot right now. It's like 90, but it feels like 110 inside here. So yeah. Maybe I should run the AC, huh? Damn it! Okay, so I made the wooden frames and cut it nice and round, and there's a little lip to it so I could catch all the epoxy. And the fit for this one is perfect, a little bit of space for the glue. This one I broke a bit, as well as I did it off-centered, so I have a little bit of wiggle room. I would say about an 1/8 inch room. A little too small, but just like last time, I think I could just fill it with epoxy and call it that. So now what I have to do is sand the tops and make it nice and smooth, and then glue the frame to the top, and then I'm gonna do the epoxy pour, and hopefully there's no leak. Got it? Okay, so the tops are actually glued to the frame now, and I can handle it. It looks real nice. Now, what I'm going to do is, I've done this in the past, I just put a lot of glue in between the gap, and you could clearly see the gap on the smaller one. And the second one too, the bigger one, there's a huge gap on one side, and then there's no gap on the other. So it's kind of off-centered by about an 1/8 of an inch. But because of that little lip, we're good on the top side, or the show side. So I'm just gonna put a bunch of glue in here. Hopefully it cures. I mean, it is gonna cure a lot faster than epoxy. And so I could just flip it over, start doing one epoxy pour, and hopefully none of it drips out. So let's do that. Okay, so the glue is actually still curing, and the gap's a little too thick, so it's taking a long time. So just as an insurance, I taped the bottom of the, I guess, the wall art or table or top, and hoping none of the epoxy leaks out. Now, another thing that I did is using a scraper to scrape the inside edge of these tops and made it nice and clean. And so now I'm ready for the epoxy pour, and I'm going to be using TOTALBOAT 2-to-1 high performance epoxy, and I'll probably do about an 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 inch thick epoxy pour for both of these. And yeah, I'm hoping none of it leaks, and I'm hoping there's no bubbles, but we'll see what happens. Woo! It's really hot. Okay, so the epoxy cured, but it was way too hot last night. So I did the pour around 8 p.m. hoping it was a little cooler, but it was still probably solid like 85 inside the shop. And so when I started pouring this one, I started noticing it started going exothermic. It was kind of hot, so I brought the fan, still didn't work. So a lot of bubbles on this one. It's unfortunate because I think this one looks a little cooler, but anyways, this one, there's still a lot of bubbles and it's kind of bumpy as well. Luckily, most of these bubbles look like it's on the surface. And so I'm hoping I could just sand everything off and hoping to get the bubbles too. And I could fill any visible bubbles, I guess, and fill it up with epoxy. And I'm hoping it's the same for this, but I see a lot of bubbles deep inside. So pretty much, let's sand it. Woo! Okay, so I've been sanding the tops, and the bigger one, actually I was able to sand it down enough to get most of these bubbles off, and this one's pretty good. Now, the smaller one, there's still a lot more bubbles left, and it's gonna take me days for me to sand these down. So since I pour it pretty thick, I think I poured it about 1/4 inch. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm gonna use a CNC machine to flatten it out. So I'm hoping that's gonna solve this issue. And once I do that, I could do an extra pour just in case I could get these little tiny bubbles off. So I'm gonna do another pour after this. So let's use a CNC machine. Okay, so something weird just happened where I tried to create the G code using Carbide Create, which I've been using for ever since I had a CNC machine. But recently they did an update where they can't let you save the G code unless you buy the Pro version. So I can't create the G code to flatten this. And then I was like, maybe I'll just jog it with the controller manually. And then in the middle of setting it up, I was setting it up and using it literally as soon as I tried to start doing it, the controller broke for some odd reason. So I can't use the CNC machine until I learn a brand new software or when I get a controller, which both are gonna take some time. So I'm guessing I can't flatten it. So what I'm thinking is I'm just gonna take it off, clean it up, and do an extra epoxy pour to fill in those little tiny bubbles. But there's so many little micro bubbles in there that it's just gonna be so annoying. Okay, so the epoxy cured, and it seems like it took off majority of the bubbles on the surface. Now, it kind of revealed the bubbles underneath the epoxy, so I don't know. So only way to really find out is sanding it. Ah! Okay, so Here it is. 2 round wall arts made out of the worst possible parts of recycled skateboards. One of them is made out of using OG pattern, and the other is made out of using the trapezoid pattern. And both of these wall arts have round walnut frames, which contrast nicely with the skateboard wood. Now the OG pattern came out nicely, and there were little to no bubbles in the epoxy, which I was able to sand nice and flat and bring back the gloss from the epoxy. But the smaller trapezoid pattern had a lot of visible bubbles that I was unable to fix, so off camera, I got the CNC machine working again and got a new controller and ended up taking off all the epoxy. Now, I had to make a few other adjustments, and I ended up routing a little outline, and I filled it up with black epoxy, and I really think it came out really nice. Really. And to make it really easy to hang it on the wall, I found these French cleats made out of aluminum, and it could handle up to like 200 pounds. So it's really easy to install, and it will be really convenient for the buyer. Now, you could always install table legs to turn it into a little coffee table, or maybe an end table, or even a dining table, but it's really up to the buyer. So if you're interested, make sure to check out my website, which is woby.design. Now, the real point of this video was trying to use the laser to make a project. And here's my honest opinion about the XTOOL P2 55 watt CO2 laser. I really like it, and the main reason is that I could use fragile, small, thin materials, and I could get a really detailed cut or engraving on these pieces. And there's no need for me to clamp the veneer down each time. I could just literally just throw it in there and align it with the software, which is extremely easy to use. Now, trying to do this on the CNC machine, it's gonna be such a hassle to clamp it down each time, and the router is pretty aggressive, so it's gonna be really difficult to handle these thin, fragile materials, which I usually use. Now, the biggest problem with this laser is the smoke. I honestly thought that I could just hook up the hose to the outside and it was gonna be more than enough, but it wasn't. There was a ton of smoke coming off from this machine, and I highly recommend getting some kind of smoke extractor or an air purifier, and hopefully that's gonna solve this problem. So overall, I really like it, and it's a simple fix to that problem. And if you're interested in getting a CO2 laser, make sure to check out the link down in the description below. And I want to give a huge shout out to TOTALBOAT. When it comes to laminating skateboards, I like to use the 2-to-1 high performance epoxy to make sure that all the epoxy fills in the gaps between the layers and gives me a strong bond that's safe enough for me to resaw it on the bandsaw. Now, one thing that I really didn't notice is how hot it is in the shop, I mean even now, but how that was gonna affect the epoxy, and pretty much it got way too hot in here. And another thing that I keep doing is using the heat gun to pop the bubbles when I should just literally leave it alone, but I can't help myself. And so I'm heating up the epoxy, it's hot in here, and it pretty much goes exothermic and cures way too fast. And during that process, all the bubbles stay in there. And for the smaller one, I honestly poured it a little too thick as well. I think I poured it up to about 1/4 inch thick, and it was just way too hot in there. And for the bigger one, I didn't pour it too thick. I think I did about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16. But for that one, I didn't try to use the heat gun, so I left it alone. And by that time, I had the fan going, and so pretty much cured normally, I guess. So something for you guys to take away from this is if you're using epoxy during the hot summer days and your shop is really hot, make sure to have some kind of fan going on, as well as, try to do it in an air-conditioned place and have a AC running if you have one. But yeah, make sure your shop is cooler. And also, don't use the heat gun. Just leave it alone. I don't know why I keep doing it, but I'm not gonna use the heat gun anymore. I'm just gonna leave it alone. Now, another thing that I heard is using alcohol and spraying it, and I guess chemically, you're popping bubbles, and that seems like a really good idea, and I haven't tried it yet, so I'll try it next time and let you guys know. TOTALBOAT has a bunch of different products, so make sure to check out their website and use the link down in the description below to get a nice little discount. And that's it for this video. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what you guys think about these little wallets. Thanks again, and until next time.